we're going to talk about the zero article. Right at the beginning of the first video, we saw a slide that says, let's look at how to use and how to not use definite and indefinite articles. Normally in English, we would say how not to use, but here I specifically said and how to not use, because what we quite often do in English is instead of putting in either a definite or an indefinite article, we put in zero articles where there is no article before the noun. And that's a very important part of how we construct English. So we're not using definite or indefinite articles. So that's why I left it as and how to not use definite and indefinite articles, to omit them completely. And that's really what the zero article is all about. In English grammar, knowing when not to use a definite or indefinite article is much trickier and much more important than knowing how and when to use them. When you're using a or an and the, then it's important in terms of getting the structure right and everything else, but by and large, it doesn't change the meaning of a sentence too much. So people will understand what you're trying to say, just that you're struggling with the articles. But with the zero article, it's a bit more complicated. If you put in an article when it's not needed, when we would never use it, when we would use the zero article option, that's when it can get confusing. So you have to really think as much as you can about when you need to use the indefinite article, when you need to use the definite article, and when you need to use no article at all, the zero article. So my recommendation is pay particular attention to this next bit. In English grammar, the zero article refers to the occasions in speech or writing where a noun or noun phrase is not preceded by an article. So whenever you see a noun or a noun phrase and there is no a, an, or the before it, that's an example of the zero article. In general, we don't use an article with proper nouns or with uncountable nouns or plural countable nouns where the reference is non-specific. Those are kind of the outline, the general terms, and I'll explain those in much more detail. But knowing when not to use any article can actually be very difficult. It's pretty complicated. So, for example, in general, no article is used when referring to means of transport. We can go by plane or by car or by train. And we don't use the articles very often, for example, in the expression of time, at midnight or on time. But equally, we say, I'm going to take the train, or can you give me the time of day? So with articles, and particularly with the zero article, we have many rules, but there are also many exceptions. So it's not straightforward. There's actually 8 rules here that we have to think about when we use the zero article. This is the complicated bit. Definite and indefinite, I think, are pretty straightforward. It's when we decide not to use an article at all, the zero article option, that we need to really start thinking. So let's look at it. The first rule is we use no article when talking about things in a very general sense. So for example, we might say, I love watching whales. There's no article in there because we're talking about any whales anywhere. We're not talking about the whale over there. We're not talking about the whales that we might see off the coast here. We're talking about whales in general, whales worldwide. So we don't use an article. Same kind of thing, I fell asleep counting sheep. These are imaginary sheep. We don't care about the sheep. We're actually just trying to get to sleep. These are general sheep. They're not specific sheep. We're not counting a flock of sheep. We're not talking about the sheep on the hill. We're just talking about sheep, imaginary sheep. We don't use an article. We use the zero article option. We mentioned earlier on about countries. When countries take the plural form, we do use an article. The United States, the United Kingdom, the Philippines, that kind of thing, the Netherlands. But for most countries, we use the zero article option. He's from Germany. He's German. He speaks German. we don't use an article. I love Italy and I can speak Italian. We don't use it for the country or for the language. So we would say, have you ever visited Algeria? Zero article. Or we could say, I love listening to people talking Japanese. So we don't use any article when talking about most countries and languages. And then here's three more rules. We use the zero article option when talking about meals or when talking about specific mountains, lakes, or islands, and most cities, streets, and airports. So let's have a look at these. Talking about meals, let's have breakfast. Breakfast is a noun, but normally uh, we have no article connected with it. We have the zero article option. Uh, you could say, I enjoyed the breakfast. If you were at a hotel, say, the hotel wasn't very good, but I enjoyed the breakfast, meaning a specific thing. But in general, we just say breakfast. Let's have breakfast. We don't use any article. Same with dinner. Time for dinner. We don't use an article in that kind of sense. And it's the same if we're talking about a particular mountain or lake or island or something like that. There's Mount Fuji. I love Mont Blanc. Lake Superior is very large. Everest is the biggest mountain in the world. Madagascar is a beautiful island. We have zero articles with that kind of proper name, proper noun. You notice these all begin with capitals, so they're all proper nouns. We don't, by and large, use the zero article. And it's the same with places that we might be familiar with. Kiev, New York, Main Street, Heathrow, Peebles, which is a small town in Scotland where I come from. Actually, the interesting one here is the middle one, Main Street. It's capitalized. So Main Street is a proper noun. It's the name of the street. This is Main Street. However, most American cities or most American towns have what we would call a main street. We don't know what the name of it is. It's just the main area where most of the traffic is, where most of the people are, where most of the bars and restaurants and businesses are. That would be a small M. And in that case, we would say, let's go down to the main street. So we'd say, let's go down to Main Street when it's called Main Street. Or we could say, let's go down to the main street when we're talking about the road that goes through the town where most of the people and the businesses are. Just a slight difference there to be aware of. And then here are the last three rules for using the zero article. First of all, we use no article when using possessive. We use no article when using nouns in an uncountable sense. We mentioned this before. And also, we have the zero article option when talking about people's names and titles. So let's have a look at these. When we're using possessives, we would say, where's my coat? We could say, where's the coat? But if we're using the possessive, where's my coat? We don't need any other word. We don't need an article. The possessive takes over. Where's my coat? She enjoyed her day out. Now you could say she enjoyed a day out, she enjoyed the day out, but when we use the possessive, her, we don't need any of those. She enjoyed her day out. Rule 7, we use the zero article option when we're talking about, when we're using nouns, in an uncountable sense. So I love adding milk. Milk here is used in its uncountable sense, so we have no article. I love adding milk to my coffee. Coffee here is also uncountable, but it's also accompanied by a possessive. So we don't need an article there because it's the article is replaced by my. I love adding milk. We don't need the article to my coffee. The possessive my means we don't need the article before coffee. And then the last one is we use the zero article option when talking about people's names and titles. So we would say, this is the president, or the president, depending how we look at it. But if we include his name, we would always just say, this is President Trump. So we don't use an article when we're talking about a specific name or a specific title. Same here with the second sentence in number 8. She is lady in waiting. That's a job title. She is lady in waiting. It doesn't require an article. It's a zero article option. She is lady in waiting to Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth, again, title, same as President Trump. It doesn't need an article because it's a person's name and title. And that's it. That's when we decide not to use an article and select the zero article option. So there's 8 different rules there, and we have to kind of think about them all, and that's why it can get quite complicated. But mastering the zero option is actually key to using articles correctly when using English. Anyway, just to sum up, the indefinite article is a when we use a consonant sound and when we use a vowel sound. The definite article is the, which is the with a consonant sound and the with a vowel sound. So again, remember, consonant sound and vowel sound does change both the articles. It's both indefinite and definite. But as far as the zero article is concerned, it doesn't matter because there is no article. We don't care how it sounds. It's just not there. But getting the zero article option right, that is the tricky bit. So what I recommend is that you guys all test yourself a little bit. I've had a good look online, and so what I suggest you do is you go to this website, speakconfidentenglish.com/articles, and test yourself. Test yourself on your ability to use definite and indefinite articles, and also, of course, to use the zero article option. That's the bit that we really need to work on. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed these videos, and I'll see you again soon.